Alright, y'all, biblical DNA here. I want to go over this article real quick because I read the research for it last night. Archaeologists find cemetery possibly linked to the ancient Israelites. Alright, so in this article by Ariel David, he basically goes over the Sergi research of Horvat Tevet from the Iron Age, right? And in this article, it's made to seem that they found Israelite samples and whatnot, but when I actually read the research behind it, it doesn't give me that they found Israelite samples. And if they are Israelite samples, it's the same situation where in the Tel Megiddo sample, in the late Iron Age 1 Tel Megiddo sample, you know, it's not considered Canaanite, it's not considered Israelite. They don't really say what it is. The same thing with the Kiryat Yerim. There's no evidence that it's deemed Israelite, but they say it's Israelite. So it's something interesting that I really think that people need to understand. Like when they just say these samples, they're going based off of the findings, like the jars, the other materials that's found in the location, what kind of practices they were they had, what fabrics they wore and whatnot. That's the main thing that you have to look at when it talks about these ancient Israelite samples. What's the typology? What's the stratigraphy? What is that saying? So it's a lot of things that were suggested where they had this influence of Egyptian customs, such as the beeswax they used to preserve the bodies. That was something that I found interesting, which I have the article up. I'm gonna go ahead and go to it real quick, and everything's gonna be in the description for y'all. Alright. Alright, this is the article right here. The Early Iron Age Cemetery of Horvat Tevet, Life and Death in the Rural Community in the Jezreel Valley. Now again, what I found out about this research was that they pretty much shared the same kind of culture from Tel Azar, Tel Megiddo. It was basically the same people. There was no different population. The burials were very similar to each other, but they were saying basically it changed later on during the monarchic, like during the Israel period, like how they stopped being buried in certain locations and whatnot. All right, so these are some important some points were made. Well, I felt like they were important, but here we go. The acidity of the local bedrock almost entirely eroded the skeletal remains and limited the ability to determine age, sex, and body treatment. Of the 13 fully excavated graves, there were no skeletons found in full articulation. An astrological analysis was performed, but only the hardest elements, such as teeth and long bones, tended to survive. 2 skulls were well enough preserved that it was possible to extract the petrous bones for DNA research. The poor condition of the skeletal remains means that the following study draws on the grave goods, burial types, and cemetery organization as its primary sources of evidence. And see, this is what I'm talking about. What I found interesting about that is they're saying that, you know, there was possible preserved DNA in the petrous bones, but why then do they have to go to the grave goods, the burial types, and the organization of these cemeteries and their locations? All right. So limited skeletal remains found within each pit was usually intended for a single individual laid in supine or pine extended position. On average, the graves were cut to a depth of just 0.3 meters. At least 4 burials had some form of above ground stone markings. in which the grave contour was either outlined or covered by fieldstones. The tradition of individual pit burial first appeared in the southern Levant during the Middle Bronze Age and was the most common burial type in the coastal plain and inner valleys during the late Bronze Age and early in the Iron Age. So that's the pots. All right. There was no standard tomb or body orientation, though the overall organization of the cemetery implies some formal planning in which burial pits were cut so as not to disturb one another. Cemetery. Other studies incorporating bioarchaeological analysis of skeletal remains have noted correlations between the wearing of multiple bangles and skeletons sexed as female. For example, in a comprehensive sample of 78 burials dated to late Bronze III, the Iron IIA in the southern Levant, metal bracelets and anklets were found most often in sub-adult burials, 46 burials, but whenever worn by adults, multiple bracelets or multiple anklets were found only on skeletons sexed as female. 11 burials. Given that the skeletal remains in burial D F3 belong to an adult, it is therefore possible that the burial with the most variables in the Iron I cemetery at Horvat Tevet could have been an elite female. Admittedly, this interpretation cannot be checked due to poor bone preservation. So basically the gender, they couldn't determine the gender. Further evidence for interaction with the Bezzel Valley may come from the linen fragments found in the graves, which were of Levantine, not Egyptian production. They could have originated in the Bezzel Valley, which was a center of linen textile production in the late Bronze and early Iron Ages. Beeswax has preservative qualities and was used for embalming in Egyptian mummification. It may have played a similar role in the mortuary culture of the southern Levant as well, given the influence of Egyptian rule in the late Bronze Age and other Levantine evidence for attempted embalming procedures. At Horvat Tevet, this may have been attempted by pouring the beeswax from the open vessels onto the body. As a preservative, beeswax was viewed as possessing magical properties. Also, beeswax leaves behind no ash or soot when burned. Notably, even other substances burned together with beeswax will not leave behind these remains, giving the impression of total annihilation that was important in destructive magic. A relatively large number of burials have been discussed and excavated to different degrees throughout the royal hinterland of the Jezreel Valley at the sites of Tel Afula, Kibbutz Hazari, Tel Kadesh, Tel Keshan, Tel Shaddad, Hefer, Yeshua, and Ahel Yafet. These sites all produce burials dated within late Bronze II, Iron IIA. This range of time is characterized by continuity in many aspects of material culture, including settlement pattern, settlement layout, ceramics, and more, and is bookended by two periods of widespread occupational gaps: Late Bronze I and Iron IIB. All right. At Horvat Tevet, they were found despite the lack of skeletal preservation only because they were buried under a shallow accumulation 0.5 meters deep and were rock cut as opposed to dug into the soil. Since most of the Iron I population in the Central Hill country was rural, it is reasonable to assume that they were mostly buried in similar simple pits. Furthermore, Iron One burials do not feature ostentatious displays of wealth. The majority of Iron One burials contain just a few ceramic vessels, and some hold no grave goods whatsoever. Unlike late Bronze Age burials, they rarely utilize precious metals, sarcophagi, or other luxury items. This reduces their visibility in the archaeological record. Depending on local conditions, this unassuming funeral kit, combined with poor bone preservation and the use of earthen instead of rock-cut pits, may have resulted in their not being interpreted as burials. Valley is potentially an explanation for the missing Iron One burials in other regions. However, in the Jezreel Valley at least, simple burials